Hello, Marta.
Hello, Cameron. How are you?
I'm great. I'm already in vacation mode apparently because we're starting a little bit late. Tomorrow's Canada Day. I just want to
That's right.
apologize to all the webinar viewers out there. We're a little bit delayed in getting started, but today Marta and I are talking about using Zoom with Pearl for virtual conferences, webinars, and more. So
That's right.
I did see some.
This is what we've been doing for a few months now. We have we have seen everything go right and everything go wrong, and we're going to share that knowledge with you today.
Yeah, that's right. And I just want to say hello to a few of the viewers that we've got. So we've got Ted is viewing from Indianapolis. We've got Dylan in from Toledo. Frank from Germany. There's got viewers all over the place here. Mexico City. IT Services is watching from Alberta, Canada. That's
Yes.
I guess
And
that's
I'm so happy that I'm apparently crying, which I'm really sorry about. But uh, makeup malfunction. Just a second, guys. Bear with me.
Oh,
Sorry about that.
that's a good sign. You want us if we start with tears, what are we going to end on?
Oh, I don't know. Thank you so much for joining us in the Crowdcast, guys. As you can see, we have Ask a Question section. So if you guys have any questions over the course of this webinar, please throw your questions in there. If you like a question, upvote that question. There's the upvote function. And we also have polls for you guys. We're going to be throwing up polls every once in a while. We always love to hear your feedback. We love to know where you're coming from, whether you know what a Perl is, whether you're a Perl user. So please participate in those as well.
I don't know how you do it, Marta. Being in front of the camera, it's been so long for me since I've done this. I've usually been producing these events, and now I'm
Oh,
sitting
that's
here.
right.
I'm just like totally getting lost in the moment.
So who is running the show then, Cameron? Is it just the computer? Is it AI? What's happening?
It is AP. It's better than AI. It's AP.
Adam Palmer.
Adam Palmer. So my protege is running the production today. I like saying that word. No, Adam.
Yeah.
Adam's been training a little bit, thrown into the fire here today because we were figuring out a few issues, and we also had some internal VPN issues. But we're not going to get into that right now. So
Yes, because we have a webinar to do. So
yeah,
why
exactly. We got
don't
this
we
webinar.
jump into that? So we are going to be talking about how to use Zoom with Pro once again. So a lot of people are trying to do virtual events right now, virtual conferences. These are usually streams that involve bringing in a bunch of guests, and Zoom is just the easiest way to do that. Now, a lot of people use Zoom by itself because Zoom has webinars, right? So you can just bring people into Zoom. You can also stream directly from Zoom, provided you have the right level of the right account. You can just stream directly to YouTube or Facebook or any other CDN. However, the limitation in that is that you only have the Zoom UI to work with. So whatever Zoom is giving you, the placement of people, other elements, that's what you get. So, right, there's no graphic overlays, there's no titles. You can't really do anything extra.
Well, and
Which
Zoom,
is why.
Zoom
Sorry,
is
go ahead,
great,
Cameron.
right? As a video conferencing platform, and we played around with it a little bit as a webinar platform. But yeah, Marta, like you were saying, it is limited in the ways that would make it good for doing webinar production like this.
Exactly. So we, which is why we're going to show you how to do it with Perl, and we actually have an example of what we're talking about. So we're going to pull up one of the webinars that we've been producing, that we produced maybe a few months ago, just to show you what we're talking about. So essentially, we're going to be going to be capturing video from Zoom, and then cropping the talking heads. Here we go. Here we have that example of a 2-up of, there's a 4-up. We're going to be cropping video from Zoom, bringing it into Perl, and then arranging it any way we want. On top of that, we can bring in titles, we can do media playback like we're doing right now, and we're also going to show you how to do fun backgrounds, how to arrange those participants any way you want them. All right, so And just to note, we're mostly going to be talking about the setup. And if you want to know how to produce a virtual event, we have separate webinar for that. Go to epiphan.com/webinars. We have a lot of really, really good stuff there. So why don't we jump into the agenda here? So we're going to talk about what is a Perl. I am assuming, I might be wrong, that a lot of you who are here know what a Perl is. But just to recap, then we're going to talk about how to produce a virtual event using Zoom and Perl. And also, we're going to talk about a better way to bring in remote guests. Because a lot of you might be wondering, this stream right now doesn't really look like a Zoom production, because it's not. But you'll have to wait till the end to find out what we're doing.
Secrets, Marta. We got to keep some secrets here.
Exactly. Okay, so as far as what a Perl is. A Perl is our favorite all-in-one video production system. It is basically a switcher, a recorder, a streamer, a splitter, and a scaler all in one. So it replaces all those devices. You connect your sources to it using HDMI or SDI. You can bring in NDI sources. You can mix them, arrange them any way you want, and then stream it out to any CDN or record it locally. You can record program out, or you can record the ISOs separately. It's very easy to use, and we like it. We're a little bit biased, but we love it.
Yeah, we're only a little bit biased, but we know how our bread is buttered. Is that an expression, or did I just make that up?
Sure. That's an expression now. I think it's a good one. We'll take it. So Perl allows you to capture high quality video and audio, as we mentioned. You can capture video sources from anything, including a camera, a computer screen. So in the case of Zoom, we're essentially going to be capturing a computer display. Again, you can stream out to one destination or multiple destinations, and you can add titles, overlays, do layouts, and do a lot more. We're going to get into that today.
And if you'd like to learn anything more about the Perl specifically, we have produced a couple of webinars previously on that. You can find those on our YouTube page, where George Herbert really gets into the weeds about technical description. He shows you the Perl UI, really talks about how you can use a Perl for production, not just for this kind of production, but for production in general as well.
And I'm actually going to throw some more polls up for you guys. So just asking what you do within your organization, because we always like to know who's coming to our webinars, and we can then better suit our content for you. And I'm also going to throw up a poll that asks whether you are a Perl 2 or a Perl Mini owner. So it would be interesting to know if you guys are familiar with Perl systems. Okay, so let's get into the meat of it. Producing a virtual event using Zoom and Perl. So I have up here an ingredient list of what you might need. So you're going to need a Perl 2 or a Perl Mini. Perl Mini naturally has 2 HDMI ins, right? So you can bring in a more limited amount of sources than for Perl 2. Perl 2 can handle up to 6 HDMI sources. So depending on the complexity of your production, the decision will be between those two systems.
Well,
You're going to need a
sorry,
host
Marta,
computer,
just to
which
clarify,
is going
we
to
can
be
do 4 HDMI and 2 SDI. On the
sorry, Cameron, can you say that again?
Just on the Perl 2, we have 4 HDMI inputs and 2 SDI inputs.
That's right. My bad. Yes, thank you for catching that. Yes, so you're going to need a host computer, which is essentially going to be hosting your Zoom call and media playback if you're doing that. And now it doesn't matter if it's a PC or a Mac. And you're going to need a production computer to essentially manage your layouts and media playback and things like that. So, Cameron, question for you. Can we just use one computer? Why do we need 2 computers for this?
Well, that's a great question, Marta. You can use one computer, and we kind of talked about this in our pre-production call, but it gets a little bit convoluted when you're moving screens around and making sure that you're manipulating the right system and whatnot. So, we're recommending 2 for this, so you could dedicate one of those computers just for media playback and titling and Zoom, and then the other computer you'd use to control switching layouts, monitoring, your crowdcast comments, for example, and questions. And maybe if you're also sending a stream to YouTube, you could be monitoring that one as well.
Okay, so 2 is definitely better than 1 in this situation.
Yeah, that's right. So that's kind of how we've mapped out this scenario here. Now,
Okay.
that second computer, that could be in the same room. It could be remote to where the actual hardware is as well. And yeah.
Okay, yeah, we'll get into that a bit down the line. And of course, you're gonna need stable internet and a whole bunch of HDMI or maybe other cables. But let's get more into that. Okay, so first thing, the most basic step is connecting the computer that is hosting a Zoom call to Pearl via HDMI. So there are basically two things that you might want to capture, right? So the first one is the gallery view, which is like talking heads. And the other one might be slide share, like we're doing right now. So I'm sharing slides in a separate window, and we might want to capture that as well. So Cameron, how would we do that? Can we just do it using one HDMI, or do we need 2?
So what we're using right now is we actually have this this presentation that you're seeing within this webinar. That's coming from an HDMI source, and the gallery view is coming from another HDMI source. So what we would suggest is having those 2 connections, and that way you can dedicate that. So within Zoom, you could use the dual monitor mode, where Zoom will automatically just set a window full screen with the actual screen share on it. So we would need 2 connections for that.
Sorry, I'm just looking at chat right now just to make sure people can hear us okay and everything looks great. Okay, so do we need a special Zoom account in order to do this?
Well, we've been using Zoom as a company since prior to this global pandemic that we've had. So we had cut over and we are using Pro licenses. The Pro license allows you to run a longer meeting. So if you're limited to the free one, then you're only going to have that 40-minute window. I think that Zoom was allowing longer meetings for a while, but we're still seeing that the folks that have the not Pro account are limited to that. So you should be using a Pro account if you want to make sure that the meetings aren't interrupted, but that would be the only benefit there.
So you don't have to do webinars. This is just a regular Zoom meeting.
Yeah, it's a regular Zoom account, and even the computer that is running Zoom for this in this example doesn't even have to have an associated Zoom account on it. So you can actually join a meeting if it's being hosted by someone else, or maybe if you're one of your presenters is hosting, or you just have a meeting ID, you can actually just join that from that computer, so it doesn't have to have its own unique login.
Okay. So this is kind of like the very basic diagram. We're gonna build on top of this. Cameron, are you able to share with us your computer screen? So we're capturing video from Zoom, and we're bringing it into Pearl, and then in Pearl we're going to manipulate essentially the talking heads in order to create the layout we want. So if I stop my screen share, will you be able to share your screen?
Yeah, Adam, why don't you just take us to the host 2 up, and then Marta, if you stop your screen sharing, I can start mine, and then I can show you the Pearl UI.
Okay, and then there we go, and go ahead. So we just want to show you what it looks like from the inside, from the Pearl side, once you brought in those HDMI sources. And via those HDMI, you obviously get the video and the audio embedded. Okay, so here we see essentially the cropping. Sorry, yeah, Cameron, go ahead, explain us what are we seeing here?
Oh yeah, for sure. Our producer is just getting the screen share lined up here, This is
Oh,
kind of
that's
a
right. Okay.
yeah. This is
I
a
see it
last
now.
minute thought for us, so we just want to make sure it was all good. And Adam's made sure to crop out all my bookmarks and my URL, so we're not revealing anything. Now this
Yes,
is the
lots of secrets there.
yeah, exactly. This is the program out here. And Marta, what was it that you wanted to see? The actual inputs themselves, right?
Yeah, so the way the way the inputs come in, and then how you are actually manipulating them within channels.
Perfect, perfect. So on the HDMI A that I've renamed to Zoom Gallery within the Pearl UI, that one is connected to the Zoom Gallery monitor on our headless computer, or the computer that Marta mentioned earlier that's connected to the Pearl 2.
The
Now,
host computer.
yeah, the host computer. Now, basically, when you connect a computer to a Pearl, the computer will recognize the Pearl as a monitor itself. So it's going to send a signal as it would send a signal to a monitor. And that's this first connection here that you can see. Now this is the Zoom gallery view, again, that's coming in on the computer, and you can see Marta and I as we're participating in the Zoom call, it's actually being hosted on that computer itself. Now the second one is going to get a little bit trippy because, of course, we're sharing a screen share. So this is the, as you can, it falls back into time and mirrors itself as it goes. But this is the actual screen share, so this is what's coming out of the computer and going into the HDMI B on the Pearl. Now on the actual layout side, this is where Marta was talking about actually mixing it all together. So this one is our host 2 up. So this is Marta and I on screen, and we're bringing those sources in from the Zoom Gallery input that we were just looking at a moment ago and cropping that. So as you can see here, we're cropping from the gallery view to bring in, to bring in our hosts into that mix.
Mm-hmm.
Clear as mud, right?
It makes sense to me because I've seen this for 4 months. But yeah, so yeah, I think it makes sense.
And here's another one just to illustrate it a little bit more. When we have a screen share up here, we could show that how we're cropping in the Zoom gallery a little bit differently. This one is a 4:3 crop, so that we can get that nice vertical space next to the screen share.
Perfect, perfect. Okay, so why don't I hop back to my presentation then? There we go. Lots of monitors to play with here.
All right, and then I'll
Cameron,
stop my I'll stop my screen sharing.
Stop your screen share, thank you. And then I will start mine. Desktop 2. Fantastic. Okay. So again, if you guys have any questions, please drop them into chat, or better yet, the question section, and we will try to get those at the end. Sorry if we're ignoring any questions right now. We'll definitely get to them a bit later. Okay, so we kind of figured out how we're capturing Zoom video, but now, Cameron, what if we want to do something extra? What if we want to do media playback? Would you recommend that we share like a video using Zoom screen share, or should we do it separately somehow?
Definitely wouldn't recommend running it through Zoom screen share. And in our experience in running these productions, we've noticed that Zoom really doesn't have the frame rate to keep up. So, generally for media playback, you want to have at least 30 frames per second. If you have anything lower than that, it's going to start to look a little bit choppy. And I think the Zoom screen share was coming in at like 5 to 10 frames per second. So it definitely doesn't work. And the audio also, because it's coming in over Zoom, gets a little bit compressed as well. So what we would recommend is actually running that media playback on that host computer and piping it in via HDMI as well.
Mm-hmm. Now, if you wanted to, could you bring it in via NDI, or is HDMI the way to go?
HDMI is a good solid connection into the Pearl. You can also bring in NDI sources into the Pearl, and using playback on a computer as well. You just have to make sure that you're staying within your limitations for overhead on your network, as obviously NDI uses your network to transmit that video. But you could also do that using NDI tools from NewTek, for example.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so then I just wanted to show here. This is what the host computer remote desktop would look like. However, Cameron, I think you mentioned that this computer doesn't really even have to have monitors. We call it like the headless computer, right?
Yeah, that's right. So the screenshot that we're sharing now is actually a view from the remote desktop viewer itself. So the computer knows that it has three outputs connected. So two are USB-C HDMI, and the third one is HDMI. And so the computer knows that those are connected. And because they're arranged in a specific way, when we remote into that computer or use the screen share, or sorry, the remote desktop view, then we see all three of those monitors in one window. The one on the top left is the Zoom gallery, so that input that we looked at a moment ago, our Zoom screen share is arranged underneath that, and then the third window on the top right is for media playback. Now with Zoom, you can isolate your outputs. So Marta, like you mentioned earlier, the audio is also coming in over that HDMI. So for the Zoom connection, for example, that was using HDMI A audio, and any of the media playback is coming in on one of the HDMI 4K audio inputs.
So this remote desktop, you're viewing this on another computer, unlike the production computer. You're not actually. This is so you're accessing it through a remote desktop application of some kind.
That's correct. So depending on what kind of system you're using, and I mean this can be on a PC, this can be on a Mac. You could run this on a Raspberry Pi, I imagine, if you've got the wherewithal to get that set up. But in this instance, we're using the baked-in functionality on Mac OS, which allows remote access. And actually today, Adam is using a PC, and he's using a VNC client to access that Apple desktop as well.
Okay, so we have Zoom, we have media. Now, what if we want to bring in some nifty titles and graphic overlays? You may have noticed, our dear audience, that we have little poll rectangles popping up every once in a while. We have titles popping up. So how would we do that, Cameron?
So the way that we're doing it today is that New Blue Titler 4 broadcast is running on that headless computer. So we're injecting the titles from that computer itself via NDI. On our Pearl 2 systems, we do support NDI Alpha, so we're able to bring in those titles without any backgrounds in the graphics. So the Alpha would be a transparent background, and without the need of using, or without having to use chroma keying for the titles too. So we can bring those in clean right into the Pearl and then inject them into the production.
So you're saying that the titler itself is actually running on this host computer, but we're able to, again, access and control it through the production computer.
That's correct. And in order to kind of keep our system as streamlined as possible, we're doing double duty on that media playback monitor itself. So when the producer is accessing those titles, he's just toggling over to the actual titling application instead of doing a media playback at that moment.
Could you bring in titles via HDMI if you wanted to, if you had an extra port?
Oh yeah, you bet. And you could actually use the one that's also configured right now for that, because it just does a full screen view, but you could do it that way. And the New Blue titling program also supports that, and you could chroma out the background on those titles, or you could have them full screen if that's what you wanted.
Perfect. That is what I wanted. All right, so we have Zoom, we have media playback, we know how to do titles now. How do we monitor and produce this entire thing? How do the production computer and the host talk to each other? And then how do we access Pearl? Cameron, why don't you talk about this slide a little bit?
Well, the way that we're doing it today, and the way that's demonstrated on this slide here, is that we're accessing the Pearl UI via a web browser. So all the switching, all the configuration, everything that you can do on a Pearl, we do via the web browser, and you can access that locally on the same network just by dialing right into the Pearl's IP address as it would sit on your network. Or you can use AV Studio to remote in to that Pearl, as AV Studio lives up in the cloud, and our Pearl can connect to that platform and then bring you back down to the Pearl itself.
Mm-hmm. So essentially, this Pearl can be anywhere in the world. As long as you have a good connection, you can access it.
That's right, and if you're using your Pearl for streaming to YouTube, obviously you've got it connected to the internet, and you'd be able to go up through the cloud. AV Studio is a really great tool. It doesn't have to go through any firewalls, anything like that. If you have a network connection, an internet connection to the Pearl, you'll be able to access it via AV Studio with just a few quick configuration steps through the Pearl UI and adding the actual hardware encoder to your AV Studio account.
Mm-hmm. And as you mentioned before, we're using VNC to access the host computer. So now, does the host computer need to be more powerful than the production computer, or do they need to be the same? What would you say about that?
Well, you definitely need to have a system that can run multiple outputs. So you want to have a computer system as your host computer that has either multiple video cards if you're using a PC, or has enough horsepower to actually run those HDMI connections. A top-of-the-line Mac Mini, for example, you'd be able to run 4K outputs from that via USB-C.
Mm-hmm.
The actual production computer itself can be a... Oh, I'm sorry, Marta. The production computer itself can be a laptop. It doesn't have to be very powerful as long as you have enough to run a browser and a few different instances. But you want to make sure that you've got a strong internet connection there.
Mm-hmm. I was just going to say that the production computer, it sounds like, doesn't have to be super powerful because it's just using the web UI and the VNC to connect to the host computer. So they don't both have to be super duper powerful machines.
Yeah, it's good to have something with a little bit more horsepower to run the titles, for example, because that does eat up quite a bit of CPU, and of course the capacity for holding the render files for those. But if you needed to make a choice between powering your host computer or production computer, you definitely want to put the resources into the host computer itself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I have another poll here for you guys. We would like to know if you've ever used Zoom to host a virtual event. If you have ever done this before, ran into trouble, or maybe it was successful. So just let us know. And from there, let's talk about... so you, Cameron, showed us just a little bit about how to create layouts and how to create channels. Now, you have this really interesting trick that you do where you have a production channel, a live stream channel, and then Zoom Gallery and Zoom Confidence. Can you explain a little bit about why you have 4 channels instead of just one production channel?
Yeah, for sure. So something that you can do in person is talk to each other. You can change the layouts. You can do all this stuff. But when you're doing a production over Zoom, you actually need to isolate some of that activity to specific channels themselves. Now, when we're running a production like today, we want to continue making tweaks within that within the actual production layouts, and you don't want to have that reflected on the live stream. So to accomplish that, we have these different encoding channels, with the first one being our live stream encoding channel, and that's broken down to having the different feeds that are coming into it between the production, media playback. Maybe you have some interstitial graphics that you want to put up, but not actually interfere with what's happening on the production itself, and you could do switching and do some cropping as well there. Now, that is a pretty quick explanation of that and how that works. Getting a little bit deeper into the weeds with the other channel encoders that we have, the Zoom Gallery, that one we have set up so that we can do our cropping in advance for different Zoom, or we can do cropping in advance for different Zoom layouts. And the Zoom Confidence, that one we use so that we can actually pipe back this production into Zoom so that we can see what's happening locally if we don't have access to, to a studio monitor, for example. So today I'm actually in our studio. I can see the studio monitor in front of me, but Marta is viewing the Confidence via Zoom, which is being piped in from an HDMI out on the Pearl 2 and then back into the same headless host computer via an AVIO frame grabber.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, right now I'm looking at my Zoom and I am seeing essentially the live stream through my Zoom. The studio is one of the guests, I guess, in our Zoom call, and the studio account is using the Pearl HDMI out to show us what is happening on the live stream, so we can see exactly what you guys are seeing, basically.
Yeah,
which
exactly.
is really, really useful.
And using that Zoom Confidence, we can also manipulate what's being fed back. So, for example, we see it a little bit different. We have the time on there. We have a description of what the channel is that we're viewing, and we can also send messages to the hosts that are participating via Zoom. So we have a full screen layout with text on it, and then we can have that pop up right on the Confidence monitor in case we need to send some messaging to the hosts that are participating via Zoom.
Exactly. And so now our producer is using Epiphan Live, which is our live production switcher. He's accessing that through the web UI, and he's switching between layouts as he sees fit. So if he needs to bring up the media playback layout, he does that. And Cameron, I know you had this really neat trick that you came up with about making sure that everyone is in their right place in the Zoom call. Because things happen, people can drop off from Zoom, and that messes up the whole arrangement. And I think these yellow tiles that we have here is kind of like the answer to that. So can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, for sure. So kind of quickly touched on it earlier, but didn't get into too much detail. Now, what you can see on the screen are layouts within the Zoom gallery channel. We've set up a few different configurations depending on what our expectations are for the actual Zoom gallery. So if anyone has used Zoom before, they're familiar with the gallery function. If you have 2 people, you'll have 2 up on the screen. If you have 4, it'll be a 4 grid, and then it expands from there depending on how many participants you have. So if you're doing a production with 7 Zoom participants, you want to get as much of the blocking or crops done in advance. You load up your 7 up with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 in yellow squares with the black number indicating which square is which, and then you can go into your layouts in advance, do all the cropping on that, and then when you're actually ready for the production, you'd flip over to the live view within the Zoom gallery channel, encoding channel itself. Mm-hmm. Now, explaining this is, even just as I'm saying it out loud, it is a very complicated way to do it's a not very elegant solution for an issue that's kind of inherent with using Zoom, is the fact that everyone's in these Zoom gallery positions themselves, and when you are getting ready for a production or in the last few minutes, doing all the cropping in advance saves you that last minute time.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so why don't we do a little recap then? We're going to try to go over all the elements again and put them all together. So we have the Zoom HDMI in from the host computer. We have 2 arrows there because one is for Zoom Gallery and the other one is for screen share. On top of that, we have the HDMI out that we're going to later pump back into Zoom using a capture card, not shown here, in order for all the participants to be able to see exactly what's happening. On top of that, we're bringing in media playback. Now, this is optional. We're going to have like a bare bones diagram in just a bit, but this is the way we're doing it, like the works. If you want to get the works, this is the diagram for you. So we're bringing in media playback from the same host computer via HDMI in. So that's 3 HDMI ins for the Pearl 2. With us so far, I hope. Then, if you want to do titles that you guys have been seeing throughout this program, we're adding New Blue Titler. New Blue Titler is something we like to use. We're familiar with it. I'm sure there are other titling software out there. But we are bringing that in through the host computer, but we're controlling it through the production computer, and we're bringing it in via NDI. So all the dashed lines are kind of something that's done over the network, and then the solid lines is something that is hardwired in. And then we have to find a way to control all of this. Now, you can access your host computer from the production computer using VNC, which means all of these separate systems can be anywhere in the world, and you can still make it work, which is great. This is great if you have limited bandwidth where you live, for example, as a producer, but you have much better bandwidth in your place of work, at the office, like we do, for example. We have much better internet at our office. And you can control Pearl 2 using a web UI in order to create your layouts, monitor sound, video, do switching. So all of that is done through a web UI. Then, once you have all this beautiful, all these connections happening, you can stream it out to CDNs. You can stream out to one CDN or multiple, YouTube, Facebook, anything you choose. So that's kind of how we're doing it on this diagram.
And it's just that simple.
It's just that simple. It's just that simple. So I just also wanted to show you kind of like the bare bones setup, right? So we have titler here and we have media playback, but if you're only trying to do capture talking heads, basically, if it's a more simple virtual conference that you're trying to stream, then maybe you don't need the titling software. Maybe you don't need the media playback. You can get away with just using one HDMI in, and I think a Pearl Mini would be great for this instead of a Pearl 2 that we have up here. You're gonna pump in your confidence back into Zoom, and then everything else is kind of done the same way. Any comments, Cameron?
Sorry, Marta, you're speaking of Zoom. Zoom was kind of cutting in and out there, so I missed the last part you said.
Sorry about that. So, yeah, I just wanted to compare the two different ways of doing it: the bare minimum and the more complex way of doing it.
And of course, as you're probably wondering, or if you're watching this, I say, okay, why don't I just do this all in Zoom? Why am I using a hardware encoder? What we found when we were initially looking at getting into producing more webinars is that the compression and the quality wasn't there within Zoom. So for us to inject these slides and other sources, and also make sure that we could go to multiple destinations, the mixing a hardware encoder in was the wisest solution.
Mm-hmm. And someone is asking whether Pearl can do titles. Pearl can do very, very basic titles, so just rectangles with text that you can bring up. So you can do titling directly from Pearl, but they're not going to be, flying graphics, animations. They're not going to be super complex.
Yeah, that's right, Marty.
So,
you can use a title or a program like. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, Cameron.
You can use a program like New Blue Titler to inject titles into your production, add the little animation to them, have transitions in and out. The Pearl does have a built-in titling where you can build titles on top, or you could build titles as PNGs and layer those within your within your production using the layout editor. So there's a few different solutions. We actually used that last week. For example, we just had PNGs for all of our titles on that production as an example.
So before we get into how we're doing today's webinar, because you may have noticed that the quality isn't exactly Zoom-like, so we're going to explain how we're doing that. We do have a few questions, so I'm hoping we can maybe address a few of them before we move forward.
Yeah, for sure. I've
see.
loaded up the questions here.
I'm gonna read them. Does bringing in several instances of the Zoom session as an input for compositing create additional tags on the computer /Perl/stream?
Does bringing in several instances of the Zoom session as an input for compositing create additional tags on the computer Perl stream? So it won't add any additional tags to the computer or the stream, but as you make layouts and do cropping within the Perl, it will affect the performance. So if you have like 100 different crops on one layout, I imagine it would affect the performance in a noticeable way. But for cropping a couple of different sources from one input, it doesn't add any real tax to it in a measurable way itself. Now, the reason I say it doesn't add any additional tax to the stream is because the stream is going to be just steady at the 1080 or 720 resolution that you're putting through. Obviously, when you have motion or stills, it will come up and down if you're using a variable bit rate. But we like to use a nice constant bit rate of 3500 or 3.5 megabytes when we're doing 1080.
Thanks, Cameron. This question might be near and dear to your heart. When will Perl 2 allow us to load videos? So people are asking about media playback on Perl. I know you are the biggest advocate for that. You are always pushing our development team for media playback. Is that so?
That is true. You're totally putting me on the spot here.
I'm so sorry. It's fun.
So from what I understand, and this is one of these questions that if George Herbert had it, he would make his pensive, stay tuned face. So yes. Stay tuned. Incorporating media playback into a system like the Perl as an encoder is not something that will be taken lightly. Obviously, it's going to be quite a bit of development and effort, but it is something that's on our radar, and it would obviously add quite a bit of value for Perl 2 users to eliminate the need for having another input just for media playback. But yeah, I would stay tuned and stop asking.
Well, yeah, this is something that our customers are definitely interested in, so we're definitely looking into that. This is something on our radar, as Cameron said.
All right, so here's the softball one.
What's that, Cameron?
How can you configure a Perl 2 to record ISOs? So earlier we were looking at different encoding channels. Now what you can do on your Perl 2, if you have an ISO that you'd like to record separately from your production, is you can set that up as a separate channel and then record that channel using just the input that you want as a layout on that channel itself. So for example, if we wanted to record the Zoom gallery and have it as an isolated recording, then we would put that Zoom gallery input onto a layout on the channel and record that one separately. Now obviously as you add more encoding channels, it does add more, it does take away from the processing on the Perl, so we want to keep that within the limits.
Do you think you want to show us, Cameron, using that same layout that you showed us in the beginning?
Yeah, for sure. If you haven't stopped sharing your screen already, why don't you go ahead and do that?
And I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing, because people in chat are also asking to kind of see the Perl UI again, so I think that would be beneficial.
Yeah, for sure. All right, Mr. Palmer, I am sharing my screen. Oh, perfect. That's up there now. Super. So I will just make a new one as an example. So we'll go over here. We'll add a channel on the left-hand side. Now for this one, maybe I want to do just what I described earlier. So we want to record the whole Zoom gallery itself. So we would bring in our Zoom gallery as a video source. Make sure that our Zoom audio is also selected on here. We'll save that. Because we're doing this as an ISO, we don't have to have any other layouts inputted on here. And go to record and start recording. And it would be just as simple as that to create that ISO. And then we can, just as an example, load that guy up right here within our media playback.
Mm-hmm. Awesome.
Yeah.
Looks great. Thanks, Cameron.
Just that easy.
Just that easy. And I can answer the question, can you show again the cropping facilities? Because you just did. There we go. Done. Let's see. Another question that we had in here was, someone was asking, what is an NDI source?
So,
do you want to take that one?
Yeah, for sure. So NDI stands for a network device interface. NDI has been developed by NewTek, and you can find it on all kinds of devices now. Cameras are supporting NDI. NewTek has also developed a suite of programs for you to share your screen via NDI. You can send video via NDI. Now, for us today, we're using an NDI program called NewBlue Titler for Broadcast. And so that allows us to inject titles into our production. Now, Adam, if you actually take us back to the screen share again, I'm going to load up our NDI source itself. So this is our NDI source. We've been connected for about an hour and a half on here, and the Pearl recognizes that we're bringing in that signal at 1920 by 1080. Now, Adam, if you could just for a moment, maybe start our 5-minute countdown timer as an example. So Adam's going to activate that title within the titling program that he has access to via that VNC. So I am just going to start that here. Our VPN is getting some maintenance today, so Adam just wasn't able to access that at that exact moment. But I've started the title here,
go.
And so you can see that that title is overlaid onto this current layout that we're looking at, and is also playing just in the snapshot. So I'm not sure exactly what the frequency is of the snapshots, but it's not a live image. It'll just refresh every few seconds. But you can see that coming in from NewBlue. Now, just to further explain what's going on and what you're seeing, within our live stream channel itself, we have our layouts, and on our program layout, we have the NDI source as a over top of our actual program, so that any of the titles that we inject via NDI are going to be put on the actual program itself as it's coming out of the live stream channel. That way you don't have to have NDI on every single program layout for your actual production switching. So a little bit of a hack there. And maybe just if we do have any Pearl 2 users that are considering using a program like NewBlue Titler, what I've done is I've made a blank PNG. So as you can or can't see here, this is a blank PNG file. So it's a 1920 by 1080 file that is a blank PNG. So it has no data in it at all, or no image, no data. And what we do there is use that in lieu of our no signal image on the Pearl, so that when you're configuring your NewBlue titler, you can just pop it on as a layout, and you don't have anything over top of it. Because when you're not receiving a signal from NewBlue, if you don't have it turned on, or if you haven't activated a title, then you'll end up with a solid graphic over top.
So essentially, NDI is a network input. It's very useful because you don't have to have any. Oh, sorry, camera speaking over you, because my Zoom is really acting up. It doesn't want to stay connected. So yeah, NDI is a network input where you don't have to have any extra cables. Everything just happens over Ethernet. It's like magic. And there are tools for this. I think, who was it? NewTek, who came up with NDI, has really nifty tools that can help you capture, basically turn any computer into an NDI source. And it's very, very easy.
Yeah, that's correct. NewTek has done all the development on NDI, but they have made it available to use as a for us as a hardware encoder company. We're able to bring in NDI sources, and that of course is all powered by NewTek.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's put a pause on answering questions. We will definitely get back to them. I just want to finish up with our presentation. So Cameron, if you could stop sharing your screen, and I will start sharing mine again. Here we go, and here we are. Okay, so just to answer the question, I think people are a little bit confused about whether we're using Zoom to do this, or why they're seeing different videos of us in your layout editor. So let's actually kind of pull back the curtain and explain how we're doing this. So we are using SRT streaming protocol to bring in the audio and video, which is why you guys can see us. You can see that the quality is much higher than that of Zoom. So essentially, both Cameron and I have a Pearl that is able to do SRT now. Here's a little diagram. So both of us are bringing our video feed through the Pearl, and we're streaming it out using SRT, which is Secure Reliable Transport protocol that Pearl now supports. It allows for much higher video quality and audio quality. And the reason you guys see us in Zoom, you see those layouts in Zoom, is because we're actually hearing each other through Zoom, because we need that ultra low latency communication. We need to be able to hear each other instantaneously, whereas with SRT that's a little bit more difficult. So we're kind of using Zoom as a back channel to make this happen today.
I imagine a few of the viewers' minds are just going like this right now. We've incepted them,
what?
and their brains are just blowing up. So yeah, that's exactly it. We're using Zoom right now as our back channel communication. That way Marta and I can have this conversation with each other. And as Marta's showing in the diagram here, we're bringing those SRT signals into the Pearl and mixing those together as the layouts that you're seeing now. Just even kind of further complicate this explanation, I'm in the studio today, and so my video source is just coming straight from a camera. But webinars that we've been doing recently, it has been fully SRT, where both hosts are coming in via SRT versus Zoom. And like Marta said, that allows us to have a much better video quality. We're running full 720 or full 1080 on those sources, depending on the host's bandwidth and their connections. And of course, the audio is much higher than what you get from Zoom, and unaltered as well, because Zoom will add quite a bit of compression.
Mm-hmm. Now the presentation is actually being shared through Zoom. So I'm sharing my screen right now through Zoom, because that's probably the easiest way to bring it in. You don't have to do any extra tinkering. But the video and audio is coming in through SRT.
That's correct.
And again, all of that is really easy to arrange in Pearl in the layout editor.
That's right. And as some of our viewers might know, with SRT being secure, reliable transport, it is very quick, so the latency is quite low. But if you do have a less stable internet connection, or maybe a slower internet connection for one of your hosts, then you can add delay to that, add the same amount of delay to the other host, for example, and then when you're mixing them back into the Pearl, they'll be back in sync.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I believe right now each of us has. Oh, okay. You're not doing this. You're not doing this through SRT. I keep forgetting. We've done a few webinars in the past that both of the hosts were using SRT, but in this case, it's a little bit different. I am the only one who is actually bringing my video through SRT. Is that correct, Cameron?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay,
And Marta.
My bad. I apologize.
No, it's all good. We're constantly changing our configuration, experimenting with different inputs and sources, and we just like to keep Marta as confused as possible when she's trying to explain
Yes,
stuff.
I think that's very fair. That's
Now, Marta,
exactly what's happening.
as Marta mentioned, she is sharing the presentation via Zoom, which we have found to be extremely easy to do. And because you're sharing it via Zoom, anyone that's is a part of the production can see that on their computer as well. They could see the actual presentation live as it's being shared. Last week, we experimented with sharing the presentation via SRT as well. So we did both of our videos via SRT, and then George Burchell, who was hosting from his home in here in Ottawa, had using a Pearl 1 or a Pearl 0 as we as we call them, the original Pearl. He was able to inject 2 HDMI sources into that Pearl and send them both via SRT to our studio, and one of them was the screen share. And of course, we chose to do that one at a much lower frame rate, so I think we had like maybe 5 or 10 frames per second on that one, because you don't need to have as high a frame rate with slideshows or with a slide deck like that.
So this could be a good way to bring in multiple guests. Now, provided that each of these remote guests is going to have either an SRT hardware like Pearl Mini or Pearl 2, or an SRT software encoder, vMix or Wirecast or something like that, and they will have to stream out from their side using SRT. SRT is now available on Pearl, so if you update your firmware to the latest version, 4.12, then you will be able to take advantage of SRT.
That's right. We just released that on Monday. So the firmware, that firmware update dropped on Monday, and it brings features like SRT. We support SRT in both listener and caller mode and rendezvous mode. Rendezvous mode is a really powerful connection protocol for SRT that allows you to get around firewalls, around some of the network issues that you might have trying to use video over IP solutions like that. But yeah, that just was released on Monday. So if you're a Pearl 2 user and you haven't had an opportunity to update your firmware yet, please do so you could start playing around with those tools. And as Marta mentioned, if you have a hardware encoder like a Pearl Mini, you can send that signal via SRT. There's also SRT applications available for Android or iOS where you could turn your phone into an SRT either receptor or transmitter, so you can send that audio and video. And oftentimes, your phone is going to have a better camera and microphone than your laptop and webcam will. So
that's right.
Being able to use that will inject a lot.
Absolutely. All right, so that's pretty much all we had as far as the content goes. We hope that made sense. If you guys have any more questions, we're going to get to those now. So let's go back into Crowdcast. I'm actually going to go ahead and activate my last poll. Okay, number 5. Does Zoom and Pearl production workflow fill your needs? So based on this webinar, do you think that's something that might work for you as a Pearl user? So that is now live. And let's go ahead and look at some more questions, Cameron, shall we?
Yeah, I was just reading through some of the some of our comments from our mod group. So we have another back channel chat. I don't think my audio has been out of sync, but it is possible because I was playing around with another new configuration before the webinar today. So hopefully I didn't break that. But yeah, Marta, did you have a question in mind that you wanted to get addressed?
Yeah, someone is asking how you handle cropping from Zoom's gallery when people are moving around or someone joins and leaves. I know you touched on that, but maybe you can reiterate.
So that is the single most hugest challenge with using Zoom for productions like this. So as you've been on Zoom calls before, when someone drops off, if you have 4 people in your grid and someone drops off, then that third person is now going to shift over to the middle, and the last video is gone, and now it's totally ruined your crops. So if you were pulling from someone in that third spot, and then your 4th participant, their Zoom connection dies or whatever, then they just drop off entirely. So a solution that we've had kind of as a backup, or if we're anticipating someone's internet connection is slow and they're going to drop off, that we have people waiting with their video turned off on that Zoom gallery. So maybe it's your producer, maybe it's someone who's a moderator on your live stream who is a part of the Zoom call, and they're ready to turn their video back on. Now, there's a couple other kind of tricks in there, but we found that works pretty well, but it's not instantaneous, and there's no adaptive cropping within the Pearl to accommodate for if someone drops off and everything shifts around. It all just kind of breaks. So oh, sorry, Marta.
You also mentioned that you have like a little trick for this, where you have pre-made layouts for when people drop off. So you create specific layouts. For example, if you now have three people instead of 4, you have a layout for that, so it doesn't look terrible, right?
Yeah, that's correct. If you and it would get a little bit convoluted because the variables for people dropping off and being available will go up very quickly. But for example, today with you and I, we have just a 2 up. So if we were expecting maybe some connection difficulties, or for Marta to drop off or myself to drop off via Zoom, and we were running the production that way, then you would have alternate layouts that have alternate crops that you could cut over to in that event.
Mm-hmm. Perfect.
Now, okay. IT Services, who is a absolute powerhouse on the chat today, just answered a question I was going to address. It was an easy one. SRT is Secure Reliable Transport, and also a very overused acronym. Marta now sees them everywhere on, car hoods, Chevrolet car hoods. It's a SRT engine type. It's also subrep type, which is for subtitles, a prefix for subtitle files. So if I had any
we're
feedback,
definitely talking about secure, reliable transport.
Yeah, exactly.
And thank you, IT Services, for being a powerhouse in chat today. Thank you so much. That's awesome. I'm seeing that too now.
So IT Services, we are curious, just within the mod group, who are you, and what do you do?
Who are you?
And tell us in the chat, IT Services, who is you? What's going on? Who's this
exactly? Yes, Brandon Dodge. Yes, I was was walking by a Charger or a Challenger. I can't tell those apart. And I saw the SRT on there. Yeah, that's my association with it now too. Yeah.
All right, I'm just looking at the questions here, see if there's anything else that'll jump out. Okay, so from Timothy P. I'll just I'm not going to insult you by butchering your last name there. But Timothy asks, will this? Whoops, where'd it go?
I did that. I'm sorry. I'll bring it back. I am sorry about that.
All right, so not verbatim, but Timothy was asking, do you have to use Zoom? No, you don't have to use Zoom. We're totally agnostic to the conference, the video conference type. You can use Teams, you can use Skype, anything that will put a gallery view onto a display basically is going to work. Zoom has been very predictable in how we know how to manipulate where the placements are, so we know how Zoom works. We know that Zoom will support us for our HDMI out audio as well from that gallery view. But yeah, you can use any number of tools for it. Microsoft Teams, we were playing around with that one. I find it really hard to actually get the gallery view sorted out and pinned. So yeah, that was a little bit tricky. I would stay away from using any of these in a web platform and use the dedicated app or the desktop application for it, because again, the web platform often behaves in kind of weird and bizarre ways, and also using a browser is going to eat up more memory as well.
Mm-hmm. Zoom just seems to be the most popular one because that's what people know. It's very easy to access. You don't have to do a lot of like logging in and tinkering.
Mm-hmm.
You can just send a person an invite. So that's the reason I think so many people are using it right now. But it doesn't have to be Zoom, exactly as you said, Cameron.
Well, and Magnus is saying that it's just that Zoom has way better sound and video than Teams. We haven't tested that to know that that's the case, but anecdotally, The quality in Zoom is better, but Zoom does add quite a bit of compression to your audio as well, and that's something to be aware of. And of course, there's no single, you can't isolate anyone's audio within Zoom. So you get the whole gallery view, everybody's in there, and it's all mixed together via Zoom.
Mm-hmm. So IT Services spoke up. It's Mike Bell from Clearwater County in Alberta, Canada. I think we know Mike Bell. I think was that story about a city hall in Alberta? This crazy story. You're gonna know what I'm talking about. I think that was the one.
Okay, cool.
Where the town hall was able to stream something pretty bizarre live.
And that was Mike Bell?
I might be wrong.
Well, thank you for viewing today, Mike. It's been great seeing your questions and definitely addressing some of the questions from the other viewers on there. I'm also from Alberta, so it's nice to see another Alberta boy on there.
Hey.
All right, so here's a question from Wasim. This one is, I'm going to hit the start answering button. So does Pearl Mini give you a virtual output that you can select as a webcam in Zoom or Teams? No, it does not. We don't have that functionality on the Pearl, but the Pearl does have an output, an HDMI output that you can send whatever you want to on it, and that can be brought into your computer as a webcam using a grabber, either the AVIO or Elgato makes the similar product, and other ones that are available online as well. But that's how we're doing it today, and bringing it in as not a virtual webcam, but an actual real webcam source.
We have a question here from Roberto. Is it possible to pass the name of the user via URL instead of logging in? I am not sure I understand this question. Cameron, do you?
Is it possible to pass the name of the user via URL instead of logging in? So I think maybe for accessing the Pearl remotely, is that maybe it? You do have to go through the login screen when you're accessing the Pearl. Maybe referring to the Zoom meeting ID link. Not totally sure what you mean by that.
Yeah, if you could clarify for us, Roberto, that would be great. Here's a question from Dan. Any latency if I use AVIO HD on the output of the Pearl?
Not from the AVIO itself, but the output on the Pearl does have about a 1-2-ish second delay. So when you're outputting from the Pearl to back in, it will have a little bit of a delay on it just from the HDMI output itself. But there's zero delay on the AVIO.
Perfect. Thank you, Cameron.
Zero-ish. Close to zero.
Why are we using Crowdcast instead of Zoom for this webinar? Does this work across other web conferencing platforms? It does work across other platforms, and we're only we're using Zoom because in Crowdcast we can't bring in this kind of video quality. So we're actually using Zoom as our back channel for back channel communication right now, and we're bringing in video via SRT. Well, I am anyway, and then Cameron is in the studio.
Yeah, and that's right. We early on, when we were looking at getting into doing more webinars and reaching out to folks, obviously affected by the pandemic and looking for information and tools for streaming, we tested out Zoom webinars and decided that the quality within Zoom webinars was not what we wanted for the screen shares, for having multiple camera sources, and also for the polling functionality and really just the usability of Crowdcast itself. So we've been very happy with Crowdcast. I think Crowdcast has definitely come a long way since things went sideways a few months ago globally, and they've upgraded their servers and definitely stepped up because they've had a lot more content flowing through their platform. But like Marta had mentioned, there's polling, questions. We can see a lot more user stats using Crowdcast, see how many people have signed up, how many people have actually showed up, etc. Done answering.
Sorry, go ahead, Cameron. Sorry, my Zoom is just it's just giving me that bad connection thing, and you're cutting out just a little bit.
Oh yeah, it's all good. All right. So does setting Zoom HD screen share affect the resolution for the capture on the Pearl? So the capture quality that's going into the Pearl is going to be dictated by whatever your computer settings are. So for our use, I've forced the computer to send a 1080 signal versus a 4K signal. That way, it's a little bit less load on the Pearl itself. But yeah, the Zoom HD screen share will not affect the quality on the Pearl because you're just going to be bringing it in as it would be brought in via a monitor source, for example.
Perfect. Any other good ones, Cameron?
Oh man, do you have a checklist / instruction cheat sheet available? No, we don't. We started
We do
writing.
have this webinar for you.
Yeah, exactly.
It's going to be recorded. You can access it in Crowdcast, and we're also going to have it up on YouTube. And I'm seeing questions in chat as well about how to do other setups. Please visit epiphan.com/webinars. And we have a lot of really good webinars explaining how to do all things live streaming. So definitely be sure to check those out. I'm going to put the link in the chat.
Perfect. And I can't spell, unfortunately, so let me try that again. Just trying to reply back to Amy Smith's comment there. Now, here's another one from Gabriel. So, can you copy and paste layouts between different channels? You seem to suggest that when talking about setting up Zoom gallery view in advance. So no, you cannot copy and paste between the different channels, but what you can do is once you've done all your configuration on one channel, you can duplicate that channel, and the next channel will inherit all of those settings, including cropping and configuration and layouts and whatnot. Now, what I was speaking to for bringing in the different variables in the gallery view was that channel itself was the source for the Zoom, for the actual Zoom production channel, as opposed to being the Zoom gallery source as an input into the Pearl. So again, if that's maybe a little bit complicated to explain, but the channel itself was the source versus the input, and then that's how we were able to use those placeholders to do all of the cropping in advance.
Okay, so we can hit answered on that. Someone's asking which version or level of New Blue effects are we using for this?
So the version of New Blue that we're using is New Blue Titler for broadcast, and I believe that is version 4.
Version 4, okay. Copy and paste between the layouts. We answered that one. Thank you, Cameron.
And I'm just checking our moderator chat here, seeing if there's anything that's
these questions always overwhelm me. I don't know. I try to read one, and then I hop on to the next, and I never know which one to grab onto. So please upvote the questions that you find interesting, so we know which ones we should be answering first. Here's one. Let's see. We use this to share the cameras going into the Pearl out through Zoom. Have an AVIO and send the Pearl out through Zoom, rather than sending the Zoom feed into Pearl and then out. Oh, okay. So you're using Pearl as a production mixer, I think.
Which question was that, Marta? I'm sorry.
This is a question from Carrie. This is the first question that I'm seeing.
Oh, okay.
So she's saying that we use this to share the cameras going into the Pearl. Oh, whoops, disappeared on me. Oh, there we go. We use this to share the cameras going into the Pearl out through Zoom. We have an AVIO to send the Pearl out through Zoom, rather than sending the Zoom feed into Pearl and then out. Is there a better way to do this? I think what they're saying is that they're using Pearl as a production mixer, like as a really jacked up webcam, basically, sending all the camera feeds into Zoom from Perl. That's a way of doing it. You can definitely do that. However, whatever Zoom streams out is going to be however Zoom decides to compress that video. So you don't really have too much control over what Zoom is going to be putting out.
Yeah, that one I'm still trying to wrap my head around, which I'm sure is how a few of our viewers are feeling after some of my explanations of how we're doing things. But yeah, I think that's how they're using it, Marta.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, why don't we do one more question, and we're probably going to wrap this up because it is already we've been going for about an hour and a half. So someone's asking, Eric is asking, do you ever use spotlighting in Zoom to switch headshots to get a higher crop? Oh, okay. I think you were talking about this today, Cameron. You were talking about how another producer that we know does this. He actually has full screen headshots instead of gallery mode. So he has to have like individual HDMIs going into Pearl, and he does not use spotlighting. Instead, he just keeps them full screen because you have more control over that. If you're using spotlighting, whoever is talking is going to be on screen, and then it's really, really hard to control if someone who is not supposed to be on screen makes a sound. You're gonna get faces that are not supposed to be there popping up. So one way of doing it is having an individual input for each person, and then have everyone being full screen.
Yeah, that's correct, Marta. One of our good friends and Pearl 2 super user in California, Mike Salas, and MSAV Productions. What they've been doing is they'll have multiple computers running Zoom, and then each of those computers will be running a different pin of the participants. So, for example, you could have one laptop that has a speaker pinned to the front window, the first window, and then that would be that one specific source, and then continue that down the line depending on what your requirements are. Now, we have also played around with using speaker mode. So on the actual screen that the screen share is on, when there's no screen share, that's actually just by default speaker mode. So whoever's speaking will be on there. And then you can also pin someone to that second monitor or the first monitor, like I was just describing, within Zoom to get a higher quality of that person. So for example, if you had a panel on Zoom with 50 people participating in a panel or some number, you wouldn't want to crop from that tiny little square on the output where the host or the moderator would be, but you can actually bring them in from that other display and have a full quality of them compared to the gallery view. So hopefully that answers your question.
Thanks, Cameron. Okay, so we are actually going to be wrapping up. We're going to try to answer all the other questions just via text for you, so stick around. And we have one final question for you in polls about what you thought about this webinar. So if you could participate in that, that would be wonderful. Thank you everyone so much for joining. If you have any more questions about Perl systems or anything else, you can always email us at info@epiphan.com, and we'll definitely get back to you. And also please register for more of our webinars. We have more of these coming up. We love bringing you this content. And again, thank you so much for joining us today.
And if you'd like to get more of our content, like Marta mentioned, you can check out our YouTube channel. We also stream live every week on Thursdays at 3 p.m. And on this week's episode, we're going to be talking with Tim from Wowza. He's our guest this week, and he's going to be explaining how Wowza works as a CDN, how it's integrated with the Perl, and also reflect on how CDNs work in general. So if you'd like to check that out, please tune in to our YouTube channel this week at 3 p.m. and you can also find us on Facebook as well. Okay, bye.